We will start out by looking at Chapter 4, and they call it the fast lane. And it's really a survey of a lot of the things over in this panel, this Create panel over here. So we'll be going over them very quickly to acquaint you with the tools that are going to be over there that you'll need to use. And as you get more involved with the program, we'll get more intimate with the different tools over there. Um, this is object-oriented design. So let's take a look at the standard primitives over here that you'll be using to create some of your basic primitive shapes. As you get the standard primitives, which are here. And many of the other shapes that you'll be working with under here, extended primitives, compound objects, lofts, things of that nature, NURBs. You'll have splines and the NURBs. And let's just, take a look, real quick look through all of these. You got your lighting here, and you'll be, in this class, you'll be mostly using just the standard lighting. Cameras, the target and free. Target, again, is everything that's sort of anchored down. Those cameras generally aren't going to move. The free ones will move. They'll rotate, dolly. You can animate them to do all of those things with the free. And typically that's the difference between the target and the free. You get your helpers here. You can create a grid. You're given this grid, but you can go ahead and create your own grid here, and it gives you the different increments or spacing that you can set it at here, and colors and things of that nature. You've got a way to tape measure things, but these are mostly what we're going to be covering in this chapter. And if you look under just the main drop down here, you'll see things like that we're going to be covering, like doors and windows, NURB surfaces. Of course, we went over lights, cameras, and the helpers over here. And this is your coordinate system. And let's cover some of those elements here. Let's start off with creating a quick box that we can place here. Take a look at. I clicked it before I gave it a height, so I can always come back and give it a height here. Or I can type it in, type in 50 or something like that, so that it's similar to the others. The object coordinate that's telling me that it can't autosave, and for whatever reason, when I loaded this into Windows 8, it locked off a lot of those files that I'm now having to go back through and unlock. Go under Administrator and unlock them. And you can see even with that little object that I just created, it's going to have its own coordinate system. This is the X, Y axis, and the Z axis. Similar over here to the X, Y, and the Z. But the difference between is this is for the object. And this can change depending on, how you might want to change this view. And again, this view, even though they put the coordinate here, it's based on the intersection of these two major line segments and the Z coordinate coming straight off of them. So that point right there, the intersection of the Z, the X, and the Y axis right there is a 0, 0, 0 coordinate. And you can see that depending on which view you're looking at that end, you'll have the Y and the X and which is the object. But here you've got X, well, you get the Y, and they're matching Z and the X, and then the Y, or the Y. The X is coming towards you, so you really, it's got the little letter here, so you can see that, and then the Z. And that covers world space pretty much. The home grid is this grid right here that they give you. And you can modify that, with both your units, and you can set it up as either meters, generic. Generic is just 1-to-1. U.S. standard, feet and inches, and then metric you can set it up in meters or millimeters and things like that. I'm gonna leave it on generic units for now. And then you can come over here and under, tools, grids and snaps, and you can set that up to for your home grid. You see what the spacing is there, and in the perspective view the grid extents is 7. So you can play around with these and get them according to whatever increments you're going to be using, and largely those will be based off of the units of measurement that you set it at. Now with the viewports, you can change viewports. So all kinds of little pop-ups happening here. I think when I tried to reset stuff, it's all of a sudden okay. You can see that in some of these ortho grooves, we are ortho viewports. We are aligned with the grid. And this one, no, we're not. I mean, it's the perspective view. The benefit of the perspective view is, though, that you can see all 3 of the axes at the same time, where these, you can't. You're just looking at 2 of them. You got to remember what you're looking at. And you can also place cameras in these views. And let's just place a camera in here real quick. I'm going to choose a standard camera, target, and just drag it so that we're viewing that cube. Now we can then, if you want to, move the camera around so that it's viewing it from our view, or view that you have, our perspective. And over here you can see how the camera's sitting on the ground, so we really don't want that. Lift it up a little bit, and I'm going to have to stop that back up real quick so that we're not dealing with that. Okay. Later on I'll go into the auto backup file and I'll enable that, because I think it's a good idea sometimes to do that. You may run into a problem with auto backup where when you get the heavier scenes, and if you haven't saved, then sometimes it'll sort of overwhelm your program and your computer, depending on how fast your computer is, and it will cause some problems. So something to think about. And sometimes it's useful, sometimes it gets in the way. So Anyway, with the camera sort of set, we can see what are we looking at through that camera. So you can choose any of the viewports and hit C. And that gives you a pretty good idea of what you're looking at. Or here, you know, where we've got a realistic view, hit C. And that's the camera's viewpoint. Now, you can use these tools down here to either change the focal point, which sort of forces the perspective a little bit. And, you know, if you look at the camera and the other viewpoints, it's actually moving the camera to adjust it so that you know, we're looking at exactly what we want to look at. Here you can dolly in and dolly out. It tells you right there what you're doing. We've got some additional choices here. Dolly camera and target. Dolly target. And I would just suggest playing with these. And we're not going to get into these right now, but just the basic one right now I think is important, just so that you know how to dolly in and dolly out. The target, of course, is the little blue thing right here, so you can obviously move that as well. Orbiting, you can grab that and orbit it around. You can see what's happening in the top left corner with the camera. It's sort of panning it around or moving it around, dollying it around. But that gives you an idea of how you can adjust the camera. You've got a couple ways to do it. You can do it with your move tool, or you can do it down here. I think doing it down here and selecting camera sort of gives you an interactive way of achieving what you're after. One other thing we're going to look at real quick are the lights. You can choose, say, a target spot. And it doesn't work, I don't think, with the direct, but it does work. We'll try it, but I don't think it does. It works just with the spot, where you can choose a spotlight. And with the realistic view, you can actually see what that spotlight is doing. I think what we need to do with the spotlight, though, is raise it a little bit so that it's not on the ground. And then, you know, when you move that, you can see how it affects your scene in your perspective view. And you might want some more dramatic lighting. You may want to raise it. Again, you know, with these tools, you might want to zoom out and then adjust your adjust your lighting, or adjust whatever, the target, for instance, which you can do with your move tool. But very similar to the just like that, similar to the camera, you can go down here and you can go to lights and you can see spotlights, and that shows you exactly where the spotlight is. And that's the spotlight target that it's moving, so it's moving it actually out more to get more of the background. And I guess this tool will allow you to place the light hotspot. Play around with these tools. Roll light. You know, similar to the camera. Orbit camera. It tells you down here what it's doing. So start getting used to these tools down here as well. They're going to be important when you start placing lights and you start placing cameras. Pivot points. Pivot points you can set here. Let's go back to perspective view on here. It's going to give us a little cube, and I can click on the cube and sort of get the view that I want. If I select that and say I select the rotate tool and I select use pivot point center, you can see that it's already giving me the gizmo that in the center of the cube, so that I can rotate it in the center. Now I've got other choices. I can, if I want that object to be there and I want to, for whatever reason, rotate it from the center of the 0, 0, 0 coordinate, I can do that. And that's what that's doing. And there may be an option, there may be a time where that's a good option. Now if you want to select everything, select this and hold your control key and select your other cube, then you can select use selection center, and what that will do is that will find the center between these two objects, and then that becomes your rotation point. And with two objects, maybe it's not as important as when you get multiple objects, like 3 or 4 objects, and then you don't want to calculate the center of all of those objects, but you want it to rotate around those objects. Bounding boxes, we've talked about those briefly. You can go here to realistic view, go to bounding box, and it gives you a lightweight view of the objects that you have, including, and let me just throw down a cone. Now selected, you can see the segments and you can see the cone, but if I click off of it, you can see the bounding box. And what that does is that shows you basically the extents of that overall object, which for interference purposes you may want to know that. That may be an important aspect of what you're trying to do, is get things very close together, and you don't just want to generate the bounding box to make sure that visually you're not extending into some other object. Now, surface properties, and let's go over that real quick. I'm going to go back to shaded view real quick. If you look at these surfaces here, these faces, a normal is actually what's perpendicular to a face. It's just an imaginary line, well actually it's a line that does exist, but it's perpendicular to the face, both the exterior face and the interior face. And there are times where you may want to go, say, to your modifier panel and then go to NURBS, normals, and click the normals, and that way you can either flip them so that either the exterior is being seen or the interior is being seen, or both. So that's something to take into consideration. There may be times where you're on the interior of a TP and you want to see the interior of it. You don't really care to go for the computer to, when it renders, to render the outside. So that would be important. Now also you have a smooth tool here. You can see when I click it on and click it off, that's off. You can see faceted. That's on. It smooths it out. Here again, there may be times where you want it to be a little more faceted. And of course, smoothing will always take a little more of your computer's resources. Mapping coordinates. You'll always want to make sure that generate mapping coordinate is on, especially if you plan on mapping a texture, a bitmap, an image to your object. It gives you the coordinates needed to map. Now, your object modifier is these of course modify your objects, and try to start looking at some of those. But what you may want to do is right here where you see name, you can change it to some like a TP so that you can keep up with them, and that becomes very important later on. And you can manage a lot of that stuff through this particular Scene Explorer, where you see I've changed the name to TP and I can select it from here. You know, and this isn't going to be all that important with the very simple compositions that you have here. But as you get into more complex, then all of a sudden naming things and knowing what they are and creating groups and things of that nature will be more important. Cloning objects. You can select this object here, select the move tool, and hold your shift key, and that will create a clone. Now it gives you an option of a copy, which is just a copy of it, and an instance, which is a copy of it, but if you modify one, it affects the other. Say I want to change the size of that, and I'm going to change the width of it. Well, it changes the width of both of them. If I want to go to my modifier list here and bend it and angle, it's going to bend the other. So you can see one affects the other. Now the difference between that and the reference is that all of these parameters, these parameters and size and things of that nature one will affect the other. In fact, I'll show you right now. And okay, so I choose this one and I do that, and then I'm going to select reference. Now if I go here and go, okay, well, you know, I'm going to change the size of this. It's going to change the size of the other. However, if I select this one and choose bend, then I choose the angle, it only affects one. So there may be times where you'll want to use one and not the other. There's some slight differences between the instance and the reference. Transform tools, you have them here: move, rotate, and scale. I thought it was a pop-out scale. Yeah. You can transform type in, transform toolbox. That toolbox right here, you can dock, and I don't know that you're going to have a lot of use for this because a lot of that stuff you can maybe do over here, but you may find that this is something you like, this interface you like it better. Try it out. Okay, you also have clones like a mirror, where you can mirror it, say, on the x-axis, and we'll just do a copy of it. mirrored it. And again, I could have chosen to move it a little more, offset it a little more. And you can see it in real time as it does it, and then you can select, okay, well that's where I want it to be. Snapshot clones, which if you go here and you look at snapshot clones, that's actually making a duplicate along a timeline, and you can actually affect different aspects of that clone over time. You've got your array tool. I've got them down here. See my array tool, and you can activate that by either right clicking here is probably the best way of doing it, and it would be under extras. If you go to extras, it will give you these extra tools here. These are the different forms of array that you have. Start taking a look at those and familiarizing yourself, because you'll probably use all of them at some point, just like you will the pivot center arrays. And we'll get into them a little more later on. Undo, you've got your undo icon, your redo icon, and that just affects these objects that you've created and modified. You can get in your viewport here and say move your viewport around. Go, man, I didn't really want to do that. Undo, you rotate, and it takes you back to where you were. And let's just talk about lights real quick, the different kinds of lights. You've got Omni, this one right here, and that's basic, just overall light that just adds a glow, almost like a sunlight, that doesn't seem to have a direction and is just from everywhere. And I mean, we can show an example of that real quick. And let me make sure that I've got that yet. And I'll move that. Well, you can also put that there and move it. And then if I come over here and render it real quick, it sort of shows you that it is somewhat directional, but not quite as much as, say, the spotlights are. Let's go ahead and put a target spot. And I'm going to move this to where it's sort of where the other one is. And then I'm going to delete that one. And you can see how cone of vision, wherever it misses, it's a little bit more dramatic. Again, if I look at it, I could say, oh well, maybe I should have moved that back some, and then hit it again. Oop. And that shows you what that looks like. Not too much different, but when you start adding materials and things, I think you're going to find that one you can maybe control better than the other. I need to get my move tool going here. That's the. Here is a good example of naming these things, and if you don't name them, what you might end up with. Delete this one. Okay, go to the camera. Let's see what that does. Oh, you can see that it's hitting some areas. Now, of course, all that stuff you can control, and I'm trying to do it quick, but gives you an idea of, at least a beginner's idea of how some of these things work. And the cone, and actually the cone of light that they put out, and how you can actually view from those different lights. And that's a view from the actual light itself. So the light's getting all this. But you can come back here. And then you have all of these different options. All right. That's a little bit about lights. Material editing. When you start applying materials to these things, you're going to want to get into this material. I would suggest not using the slate material editor. It's very complicated, and I don't see it being of any advantage to us. So stick with the compact, and that gives you some of these options here. Then what you can do is choose one of these slots, and material, get material, and let's just pick one. Barrel blue. It gives us that, so we can drag it over here to this. Of course, you've got your option to play around with these two to fine-tune them to get the look you want. I'll probably choose another one here. Gold. Just out of curiosity, if we render that real quick, what do we get? Sometimes it'll ask you for a on one of these things because it doesn't know where to look for it. Then you'll have to just go to look and see where it's saying. And select that, select the item, of course, and click browse and add, and under this there should be under maps. What was that called, like sunrise or something? And if you don't know where it is, you can go to the top directory and right click, open a new window, type in what was sunrise, it's not there. It's just missing. I don't know why. I think I actually have it somewhere else, but it's missing from there. Let's just go ahead and click OK. And that's what it gives you. I don't have enough light on that. And you can always come over here and look at realistic. And generally that'll give you an idea of the lighting, if your lighting's good enough for those renderings. And let's just throw in another light real quick. Oh, it's sunset. Maybe the sunset was on that blue piece. I'm not sure. But you can always replace these as well. You can go to material, get material, and replace it with another color. So let's just put a cherry red or something. Okay. Not getting some of the reflection I would expect, but this is the difficult part of this program. And you're going to run into some problems with this because as you work it, you're going to find out that even though it looks one way in the samples, once you apply it to whatever you're applying it to, it doesn't always look the same. Okay, that's something about materials. Shows you a little something about rendering. Let's talk about rendering a little bit more. Rendering setup, or you can reach it down here. If you go to the renderer, this is for the default scanline renderer. Now that's one that'll take whatever it takes, and it's a software renderer in order to, and it could take several minutes to do it, and that's what we've been using, so you've seen the results of that. I prefer actually the gives you that result. But what I prefer is the Quicksilver. Down here, it's on Renderer, Quicksilver. I can even go here and set the time. So I want it to render for 1 minute because I don't want to wait more than 1 minute. But you know that it doesn't always give you the best output. Try the others. Try the scan line and try the mental ray. And they'll all take different times. This one, of course, you can select the amount of time that you want to wait, which I like that. Because you can get a pretty good idea of the way it's going to look and not have to wait all night long. And that's, you know, not a big difference. Play around with it, see which one you like best. That's your rendering. You'll want to familiarize yourself with your animation tools down here. And let's run through a couple of them real quick. Try P, perspective, and then I can zoom out. And of course I can hide all these lights if I want to, you know, to get them out of my way. Okay, I think I got them all hidden. Okay, got them hidden, got them out of my way. We're going to animate the cone. I'm going to set my auto key where it just sets keys automatically to whenever you make a movement or modification. So I'll start there, move to 50 spot. Move there, set a keyframe, you see? Move here, So that's another keyframe. Then when you play it, this is what you got. Okay. Now we can delete all these keyframes. All right, now try this one. This one's a manual way of doing the same thing. Click that and click the key. That's your first keyframe. Then you move it. Wait, undo. Then you move your slider. Move this, click another frame. Move your slider. Move this and set another frame. Then, when you run it, you have pretty much the same thing you did with the auto. It's just, it's your choice whether you want to manually do it or whether you want to do it, let the program sort of automatically select where it's going to place the it'll place the keyframe wherever you drag your slider, but it will automatically do so. Alright? That's your animation feature. And hierarchical linking is something that eventually you'll need to familiarize yourself with. And it's sort of like if you're doing an animation of a human arm, and you want to make sure that the hand is linked at the wrist to the forearm, and the forearm is linked to your upper part of your arm, and that they all move and are linked in their movements through animation. Right here. These are and we'll get into that a little bit more later on. That's chapter 4.